So we're here in Lightroom and we have a raw file that we're working with. And what this lesson is going to be about is a lot of times the one place that's the easiest to flash is right above the camera. And that's what we've done here. And that's what you'll do in a lot of your bedrooms, just sort of getting that starting point. But what I'm going to propose to you here is you can get that sort of starting point and just easily flash above the camera and have a very finished photo just by using your raw file. So the problem you see with this image is especially up here in this area, and you're going to find this extends out on the ceiling sometimes, and over here we're getting this sort of unnaturally flashy result. And this is what the type of things that really keep viewers' eyes into thinking, oh, that's a flashy image. So I haven't done anything to this particular photo, but what I want to do is, because the way light drops off as you get further away, I want to try and lighten this up a little bit and just sort of lighten the background. And then what we're going to try and do, these areas that we're talking about and having some problems are getting worse, right? So we're in Lightroom here. We might just do some of the normal stuff we do just for a normal image, like pull the highlights down a little, maybe play with the whites a little, whatever. You can play with that on your own. Maybe get a little bit of vibrance in there. But we're going to jump down here to the vignetting. And this is a very, very powerful technique that you can use just within your, within Lightroom, your WAV file. You see that's already working with the default values there. But you have a lot of control here. You can come down here. I feel like it's getting too dark on the bottom and then not dark enough on the top. And you could probably play with that, maybe offsetting this. But that's why, anyway, I'm going to get to how I really prefer to do this. But the point is here, you can do this in Lightroom. But as most of you know, I like to sort of get people into Photoshop. We're not going to use the excuse that you can do this in Lightroom. We're going to learn how to do it in Photoshop in a minute and even develop an action as well. So you can say you can play with the midpoint there in Lightroom, and that's great. It's great to have these controls in here. It's kind of akin what we're going to be able to do later on in Photoshop with actions. You can play with the roundness. That's more, it starts off more of an oval and it gets a little bit more round when you play with that one. And this is the feather, and of course that's zero feather, and once again you're going to see this in Photoshop. So point is, great to play with this in Lightroom. I think you do have a lot of control in here with your file and your raw file. You're just working on your raw file. You could even use the adjustment brush, as most of you know. But we're going to learn how to do this in Photoshop because I think that's a lot more powerful in general, and I just try and sway people toward Photoshop in general. So let's get over there. Let's just jump straight over. Excuse me. And we're going to get that same file and we're going to sort of open him up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my preset onto this guy, and it's a shot out with a Tokeno lens. And what I'm going to do here, and don't forget we're working with the same file, I'll just white balance this, get it in somewhere in the ballpark, somewhere that's looking reasonable. I'm going to bump this up maybe to 0.5. So we got some brightness, maybe a little bit below that. I mean, let's go 0.4. Okay, so we got a little bit of brightness there. So we're just going to pull that into Photoshop. All right, so we have that in there. And we're going to jump back in and go grab the same exact raw file. But this time we're going to make it a little bit less exposed, okay, darker. So more, we'll call this our underexposed one. So we might just change this plus right here to a minus. And that's going to give us one stop of a difference. So we're going to go ahead and pull that in. And as you can see, like I was saying before, the big problem with flashing behind the camera is you get these areas bright. You can see that. You can see that when we go back. It's really causing that viewer's eye to feel like, wow, this feels like it's flashed behind the camera. So we're going to be taking care of that problem in Photoshop. And at the same time, we're sort of brightening up these further areas that don't get as much light. It's kind of unnatural because our light falls off so fast. The fact that we're not getting as much light in here, this method sort of takes care of that, okay? Because remember we bumped up that last one by +4. So let's open that one in as well. And like I said, you could do this in Lightroom because we just bumped that Lightroom exposure up a little bit. That gets us a little bit brighter back here, but then we sort of vignetted it, right? And with those great controls. Lightroom has some great controls, I feel, for that vignetting. That's really nice. So let's get rid of this so my computer has maybe a little bit easier time. And what we have here is a layer on top, that's our dark layer, and we have a layer on bottom there, that's our light layer, okay? And once again, combining these two layers, if you see the dark one, it looks great on the corners, right? Because it looks more natural. And then this one, it looks like it's been a little bit flashed, all right? So that's the problem we're having, but it looks great back here. So we want to combine those, all right? So the easiest or longest way to do this, I should say the best way to do this in my opinion, is go ahead and hold down Alt and you'll get a black mask. You come in here with a brush, and maybe I'll zoom out a little bit because that's a lot of times easier because we're working so much on the corners. And you just sort of come in here and brush in those corners, right? And that's great. This is a great, like, really controlled sort of vignetting technique where you're actually manually getting in here. And let's just see the before and after on that. Let's just check so we just brushed that, and let's check the before and after. You can see that really sort of just changes the photo a lot. It makes it feel less flashy, more natural. And it's a great way to do it. It's manual though. So maybe we want to get somewhere where we're doing this more automatic in Photoshop. And this is where I'm saying, even if you don't want to use this, sort of practicing this stuff is great. So we're going to get in here and try and make an action for what we just did. It's not going to do exactly that perfectly around like the way we had it because we were doing it manually, but it's going to do a good enough job, I feel like. So how do we do that? We're going to start an action. I'll just go ahead and press I tested this. So we're going to call this our vignette. Okay, we'll call it vignette. And what's already starting, the way Photoshop works, it's already going. So the first thing I would recommend doing for this particular action, because you're going to come in here, you're going to have your two layers like this every time you do this action, right? So Photoshop needs to know what to do, and this is what I think discourages people from actions, because this stuff can be tricky, I know. But the one thing we can do, it really helps add a lot of actions, is you can hold down Alt or Option and period. So Alt or Option plus period. I'm going to do that right now. And what that did, no matter what layer you have selected or anything, it selects the top layer. Okay, so you can see it right there, it's saying select front layer. That's the Photoshop wordage for front layer, I guess, how they put that. Okay, so we've told Photoshop what we want to be operating on now. That really helps. Okay, so we're going to go up here and we're going to grab this elliptical, this circle tool. It's a selection tool. And we are just, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and that's not affecting our action, so that's good. It wouldn't matter anyway. I'm going to come up here to the top corner up here, and just sort of, it doesn't, you don't have to be like too accurate. I'm just going to make this, and the thing is, you can play with this. Don't forget that. You could maybe make it more or less or whatever, okay? The point is, we're just going to get these points down, and so you can go ahead and create your own, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and release that mouse now. And so I have that. So it's set that selection. So that's going to happen every time in my action. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make a mask, but I'm going to hold down Alt because the mask is going to operate off that selection now. So I'm going to hold down Alt because I want to be showing those corners. So if I didn't hold down Alt, it would do the opposite of what I wanted. So if you mess it up, you can just press Command I and it'll invert it, okay? But we're going to hold down Alt here. And see, it just gave us a mask, and so it's showing us dark out there, and it's showing us what we want light in here. But it's not looking perfect yet, obviously. So you guys are going to have a way to go ahead and come over here. You got to have your mask selected, and you're going to come over here and go ahead and play with this mask feather until that's looking good. And it's at 50 pixels now. It's not looking good, is it? It's not looking good. Even I'm up here at 100, I don't think that's looking very good, okay? So if I get in this area, maybe you say around 500, it's looking pretty good. And we can go ahead and I'd say stop the action now. I think we have a pretty good action. But like I said, if you guys want to, if you feel like your action is like making the bottom a little bit too darker, well, you can mess with that oval selection earlier, right? You can make different masks. So we're going to stop that mask though. And we'll go ahead and just check out our mask by holding down Alt or Option and clicking the mask. And we can see our mask right there. And you can see there's a really nice fade, a really nice taper from very it's going to be blocking everything out in the middle and just sort of fading. So that's a really good sign that our mask is not going to be detectable. But the great part here is after you run that action, we're going to test that sucker out in a minute here. So after you run that action though, you can go ahead and play with your fill or opacity, effectively the same thing, and see you're going to have control of that vignette, okay, in terms of the opacity. All right. Another thing you could do here, maybe we'll go over that in a minute here. So anyway, just make sure you remember this is one of the most powerful things about the action. You can play with the opacity. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to sort of start over, because now just imagine we just started this image again and I just brought these guys in here. Well, guess what? Come up here, the action we just made. I'm going to press play. And look at that, it just did all that for us. So this is a really good way to be able to get in here. I'm going to leave this up to you, but you guys could even like make duplicates of your raw files and make one plus 0.5 is what we did, and plus or minus 0.5. You could, I'm going to let you guys play with that. We're not going to get into that all that in this video. And you could open them all up and then just run an action like that. So I think that's a great way to do that, okay? One thing I wanted to touch on is if you weren't satisfied with that, you could, of course, this mask is still active. You could just come in here and make sure you got a dark brush, and you could just say, oh, it's not quite making it dark enough right here, right? And you could just come in there. Oops, I should have said, I'll undo that. I should have said a light brush, and you just want to come over here and it's making it a little bit darker over there now, okay? You could see that mask change. You could see that change I made right there. Just darken it a little bit over there. So in other words, you can refine these masks after you've made that sort of initial really easy selection, okay? So very cool way to vignette images, in my opinion, and sort of get that flashiness out of your photos while at the same time counteracting what we'll call the inverse square law and making the far ends of your photos light, and while making the edges of your photos dark with one flash frame. I think that's a really cool way to do it. Okay, and I want to sort of let's see if we can jump over here. Let's see if I can get it. I got that. Let's jump in there. See my internet for some reason. Look at this. Look at this. Is this what you guys experience when you jump to my website? I hope not. Look at this. This is horrible. All right. Well, we'll see. I think we'll get there. But anyway, hopefully it loads up. But in my course, in my lighting course, we go into, I feel like, a much more sophisticated technique. It's same thing, vignette lighting, I call it. And what it's doing is it's kind of doing what we just did, but actually in a natural way, or you're actually putting in real lighting, which I think is a lot cooler, because what we just did is a cool way to sort of correct the lighting in your photos, but it's just sort of faking the corners, making them darker, right? That's all that's going on there. So this is funny to me. I'm a professional photographer and I can't get on the internet. But all right, you guys know where my website is. It's pechefoto.com. For some reason, I've lost my internet connection here. But I appreciate you guys watching. Check out that course again. I think it's a great way, like I said, I have in there a cool 2-frame technique where you're just able to sort of do what we just did, but in a different way, and it's more of a lighting based technique. You can check out, that would be the Quit Your Job course. It looks like it's popping up here. It took me 5 minutes to get to my website. That's not good, right? So and yeah, and you can see, and that would be right in there. It's called vignette lighting somewhere. Okay, so a bunch of good stuff in there. So guys, I hope you got something out of that for your own images, and for your own sort of creation of your actions in there. Don't forget, Photoshop's a really powerful tool. As long as you can sort of overcome these problems a lot of times you have with like the actions sort of getting mucked up by the name of the layer. Like that was the cool thing about what we use, select front layer. You could, for example, you could in an action, let's go ahead and delete all this right here just to show you this. You could in an action, like we have layer 1, that's probably always going to be the case, right? You're always going to have something called layer 1 when you use this technique, because you just got to be consistent. Bring the darker one on top, and if you make your action, we're going to go ahead and run another action. You select layer 1. See, it's going to say select layer 1, but as long as you have that the same exact way and you don't rename your layer, that'll work fine, okay? As long as that'll work. But I think the way I had you do it Alt period is probably a little bit more sophisticated and foolproof. Okay, so just don't let that stuff trip you up. There's usually good stuff you can look up online in terms of how to get around, name layers and actions and that stuff. I know trips people up, and it's difficult. You got to look it up, but once you really discover the power of these actions and how crazy they can just sort of expedite your workflow, I think it's a no-brainer. You're gonna love them. All right. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.